But the thing is, guys have body image issues as well, and I don't think a lot of guys talk about that, but we're constantly comparing ourselves to each other. I've always had a bird chest, like the body of a 14-year-old. I was raised in a very, very, very strict Pentecostal household, and we were at church more than we were at home. I was taught to put on masks and do things that would make people accept me. I've never met my birth father. My mom was 19 when she had me. Eventually remarried when I was 6. And her and my stepdad, like I said, were really into the church, and they felt like God was calling them all over the country. I had to come out to my parents when I was 15, and I had to come out against my will. My youth pastor at the church found out and was like, either you tell your parents or I will. It's a fairly large church, about 8,000 members, and my parents were really about appearances and church politics and how close they could get to the pastors, because it was like a sign of status to them. And so I was an embarrassment. Like, she was hysterical, and she called her job, and she was just like, I will not be in. There's a family emergency that I must tend to. So people would come over with, olive oil that they called anointing oil, and they pour it on me and speak in tongues and rebuke demonic, foul spirits out of me. But never once did they say to me, I love you. Never once did they say to me, this is okay. All their thoughts were like, let's call this pastor, he can come over and pray. I would cry. I remember for a little while, I just told them I was delivered, I was set free, just so they'd get off my back. I'm like, I'm okay, I'm gonna go get a girlfriend, like it's gone. But then I fell for this boy in my high school, and he came over, and my mom caught us hugging, and then it was just World War III. And at the age of 17, I'm a very nonviolent person, but my stepfather and we got into a fist fight. And that was the day that I was like, I'm out of here. I can't do this anymore. And so I spent my entire senior year couch surfing, living with friends. But I graduated, and no one knew that I wasn't living at home anymore. About 2 to 3 weeks after I had left, my stepfather was arrested for molesting my sister. No. And he had been doing it for years. I wanted to kill him. And even during then, I think what hurt me the most was that my mom, she still was kind of like, I was like, do you need me to come around? Do you need me to come to the court cases with you? And she was like, have you changed your life yet? I graduated high school. My mom would not help me with financial aid to get into schools because of my lifestyle. And I had gotten accepted to Cal Arts. I really wanted to be an actor. I just gave up. I felt like, what's the point? Ecstasy was like the very first drug I had ever tried. I wasn't raised around even pot. I wasn't raised around drinking. I had never even heard my parents curse. So I was a very sheltered kid. I tried ecstasy, and then within 6 months, I was doing cocaine. And then I was offered a line at a party, and I thought it was cocaine, and it was meth. And I did that line, and then from that one line, I was hooked for 5 years. From 18 to 23, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't using meth. I was just waiting tables and doing drugs. I stole from so many people. I was the kind of dude that would like steal your wallet and then like help you look for it. I was a very shady individual. Nobody left anything around me. I didn't care who I hurt along the way because I was just so angry. My rock bottom was the day I found out I was HIV positive. I was in Atlanta at the time, and I actually had this best friend, this girl, and she was pregnant with a guy's baby. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, I'm glad now I did, but I begged her to have this child. I was like, we'll raise this baby together. And she did, and that's when I knew, okay, when the baby was born, I actually cut her cord, and I was so high on meth, I couldn't like grip the scissors. Like I was shaking, and I was like, okay, something's gotta give. And that was like the beginning of me saying something's not right. I also was getting boils, like all over my body. And every time I went to the emergency room, not one doctor was like, hey, when's the last time you were tested for HIV? They would just like treat it and then send me on my way. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to face it. And then I had to face it. I got so sick. We had decided we were gonna leave Atlanta because no matter how many times I would delete my dealer's number, I knew where he lived. So I would just show up. And so we moved to Charlotte, and on the way to Charlotte, I was just insanely sick. By the time we got to Charlotte, she took me to the emergency room. And I remember like being rushed into the emergency room, and I opened my mouth to tell them what's wrong, and I threw up everywhere. They took me directly to the back. In 20 minutes, they were like, you have HIV. It was more than HIV, I had AIDS. I had 5 T cells. I was dying. In that moment, I wanted to live more than ever. I just felt like this warmth, like start at the top of my head and travel all the way down my body. And I could feel something inside of me saying, you're gonna get through this. This is not gonna kill you. And I called my mom from the hospital. And I called her crying, and I was like, we hadn't spoken in 2 years. She didn't even know where I was living at the time. And I said, they're saying I have AIDS, and I really want to get my shit together. Can I come live with you, with this girl and this baby? And my mom was like, a girl, a baby? Sure, come on through. And boy, that was an interesting move. It was culture shock, moving to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. But one of the first things I did was join a church, because I had thought, oh, this all happened because I've been living in sin. So I need to get back to my roots. And this church encouraged me to marry this girl. And my mom and I, we had finally gotten to a place where we were getting along. So here I am, I'm helping lead the music. She's like, that's my son. You know, for the first time, I felt like she was proud of me. And it was around that time that I told my wife at the time, I just told her, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Then it was just like, I now know that everything was happening for a reason, but American Idol was having auditions at the time. I said, what the hell, I'll give it a shot. And that was the beginning of me saying, maybe I can do this music thing. And it was after my mom had turned me into the church because I started seeing a guy. And you know what, to be honest, I'm glad she did. I didn't even know that domestic violence was a thing with two guys. Like I said, I'm a very non-violent guy. He had hit me in the face with an iron. It wasn't turned on, but it's still like, was really swollen in the face. And what he used as leverage to keep me from leaving was he was gonna tell everyone that I was HIV positive. He never wanted to use a condom, but then he would say, you're not leaving until I get tested. And if I find out I'm positive, you're stuck. The moment he tried to hit me with a hammer, it was like this light bulb clicked on inside of me, and I was like, oh, you don't love me.
You were like sleeping with people through those years?
During that time, I had that really abusive boyfriend. We were sleeping together. And you know, I always told my partners, there wasn't always the easiest conversation to have. I would kind of like fill them out.
Was it the kind of thing that you were like,
afraid to listen?
Of course.
or like how, did you not know how far to go?
Some guys would feel betrayed if you made out with them and didn't tell them. There was this one guy when I first moved to New York. He was a choreographer. We didn't do much, you know, but I told him the next morning, and we had made plans to do something all day, and he's like, oh. And he seemed like really cool about it, right? The next day, he had to like go to work, and then we were gonna like link up later, and then he wouldn't take my phone calls, and so then he just texted me and was like, you left some stuff over here, I'm gonna leave it with the doorman, can you come pick it up? And I was like, what's going on? And he was like, you know, you should have told me from the very beginning, this is not something I wanna be involved in. And that was that, I never saw him again. And I began to honestly think that maybe it was my lot in life to be single. I'm truly an unlovable, I'm an untouchable. Since then, obviously, my thoughts have progressed. There was one guy that lived in Brooklyn who took it really well. And I told him fairly early on, and I remember we walked around a park in Coney Island, and I just told him, and he was really quiet for a few minutes, and then he just said, but I like you, so it's okay, we'll get through this. We didn't, it was like 3 months. I mean, he's a cool guy, it wasn't meant to be. My friends started hitting me up saying, hey, The Voice is coming in town, you should audition. And I signed up. Then I was realizing how easy the audition process was going for me. Like I was flying through all my auditions, and then came like the story part. I knew how I was gonna share my story. I was gonna talk about being an ex-drug addict and how I went from homeless to following my dreams. I was not gonna mention the HIV thing. Who starts their career off talking about this? Like, you know, I can't ever be taken seriously as a sex symbol and all that. Like, I mean, I had built up all these beliefs about myself in my mind. I ended up meeting this girl at my church, and she was not on my radar at all. Like, she was a girl, you know, I was just like, you know, she's really nice, but she is pretty psychic. She reaches out to me, and this was right before I was about to go onto The Voice. I was going through the audition process. She goes, I have like a reading for you. She told me things that no one should have known. She knew about the HIV before I said it. She was like, I see you as a little boy crying in a closet. I see you now as an adult, you like cry out to God in the shower. And I'm just like, how do you know this? Like, how do you know these things? And she became like instantly a really good friend of mine. When I decided to talk about having HIV on The Voice, the producer got really quiet when I called him and said, I want to add something to my story. And he got really quiet, and he goes, I have to call you back. And I said, that's it. Why did I open my mouth? It's over for me, it's done. They called me back about 10 minutes later, longest 10 minutes of my life. And he goes, we'd be honored to tell your story. And I didn't know that talking about the one thing that terrified me would actually open so many doors for me. I think that as more and more people begin to realize that they don't have to search outside of themselves for the answers, that it's always been here. Once people get in tune with themselves, then they'll realize that no one else can control them. Whether it's a doctrine, whether it's a political party, whether it's your boss or your spouse. You know how hard it is to look yourself in the mirror and tell yourself you love yourself? It's very difficult. You start to get a little uncomfortable. You feel like you're lying to yourself. But I started doing that every day. And I started looking myself dead in the mirror and saying, there's nothing wrong with you. I now believe those things about myself, as opposed to the lies that I believed about myself for a very long time.
Yeah, the girl.
Yeah.
Yes. And I remember saying to her, like, who are you and why are you in my life? Like, what is this about? Because all of a sudden I can't stop thinking about you. And all of a sudden I can't stop thinking about starting a family with you. I know I'm gay. I know I prefer guys, but there's something about you I'm really, really drawn to. And it was her spirit. And she has now stuck by my side through thick and thin. I've had just as much hate as I've had support about our relationship. And surprisingly, a lot of the hate comes from the gay community. But I can understand what they're feeling because I have to let them know I don't say I'm not an ex-gay. I'm not an ex-anything. I'm a gay guy that fell in love with this girl. We have our own parameters on our relationship. You know, I think that it would be unfair to either one of us to remain completely monogamous. I think that that would be denying a part of myself that could eventually cause problems down the road. But what we do agree on is we tell each other everything. But I don't think that a relationship means ownership. I can't tell her what she can and cannot do. I have to give her the choice to come home to me, just like she has to give me the choice. And at the end of the day, if we continue to choose each other, that's love. And we are going to have a family one way or the other, and we are sexually active. Her family has loved me like their own. They know everything about me, from sexuality to HIV status, and her dad calls me his son. Growing up without a dad, that's all I ever wanted. I don't think I would be the ideal pick for his daughter, you know? But he has accepted me and loved me as though he handpicked me himself.
When do you feel the most beautiful?
When I'm with Jiria, my girl, just even as I was walking to this today, she sends me a text and she goes, "You're beautiful. You have nothing to worry about."
Okay, so last question. So why in your body, in your skin, why is it a good place to be?
I think why it's such a special time to be alive and to be in my skin right now has nothing to do with my career, has nothing to do with my talent or even my love life. It has everything to do with making sure that I evolve into the greatest creature that I can become. And I hope that I don't stop evolving until the day I'm dead and even beyond death. I'm not here to prove anything anymore. And showing love is not what people think it means. It doesn't always mean money. Sometimes it means time. Sometimes it means a smile. Sometimes it means a hug. It's just letting people know you're not alone in this world. I know you feel alone, but you're not alone.
You're just amazing. Oh my God. You're just such a God, like this fucking prophet.
And then Wednesday.
Wow.
Oh, you guys are awesome too.
So great. I want to see the one on the side of your head.